Hi, I'm Dick Hutto. Welcome to BirdWatch.
Today on BirdWatch, we'll walk through a cottonwood bottomland to witness some of the amazing diversity of birds that use western riverine habitats. Craig Tufts will take us to a bird garden that's been landscaped to attract a variety of birds, and I'll visit with Gary Nabin to discuss the role that birds play in plant pollination.
Major funding for BirdWatch is provided by Wild Birds Unlimited, with over 250 locally owned stores. Since 1981, our backyard bird feeding specialists have been helping you attract birds to your backyard with our own regional seed blends, bird feeders, and advice.
Additional funding for BirdWatch provided by CNS Products, makers of wild bird suet for all seasons. CNS wild bird suet can be found in stores across the nation.
I'm in a riparian bottomland just along the Bitterroot River south of Missoula, Montana. Now by riparian, I mean vegetation that grows immediately adjacent to standing or running water. By bottom, I mean we're about as far down in elevation as we can get in this part of the world, maybe 3,000 feet elevation. And so when you're at the low bottom reaches, the rivers tend to be fairly large and they meander back and forth over large swath of land and creating these broad cottonwood patches of habitat. So an interesting difference between eastern riparian areas and western riparian areas is in the west, the land is very much drier than in the east, so that the birds are more likely to come in near watercourses when they get that opportunity. So the diversity of birds here in the west in riparian areas is relatively great compared to the adjacent grasslands or sagebrush or ponderosa pine forests. Now let's just head down the road and see what sorts of birds that we can find in this kind of habitat. Right out here, two eastern kingbirds right at water's edge. Really distinctive, bold black and white coloration, and the behavior of these birds is also very distinctive. The wing beat is very shallow and fluttery, and they're very low over the water. It looks like they're picking up insects off of the water's surface. I want to take a closer look at these kingbirds. And there's always a possibility of ducks. Ah, yeah, there is the kingbird over there. Oh, and there's waterfowl merganser. It's a merganser, small fish-eating duck with a serrated bill like a saw. This is the female. I hardly recognized it, but I can see the crest at the back of the head. The male, of course, has a big hood. It's called a crested diver. But she's got how many young? Look at the small merganser swimming with her. They're cavity nesters. These young birds bailed out of a cavity, who knows how high, and now they're all swimming together in the water. This is one of the few duck species that uses its wings and its feet to propel itself underwater while it's fishing. So, boy, that's a great observation. Hooded merganser and young. Now, I don't know what I like best about this kind of riparian bottomland. I think it's the quietness. We're far away from the road. There's no river noise right here. You can just hear a tremendous number of birds singing. I also like these sorts of open conditions where there's water adjacent to the vegetation. The edge provides a good opportunity to see birds right at the edge of the vegetation flying out over the water back into the vegetation. So the opening allows you to see birds more readily than if you were in the middle of a closed canopy forest. if we just listen for a minute, the music is great. There's a western wood pewee go, yellow warbler. Ooh. There's a black-headed grosbeak. Sounds like a robin, very speeded up. Ooh, woodpecker. Single note call of either hairy or downy. I always get confused telling those two apart, but luckily he's close by. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's a hairy. Okay. Thought it sounded a little lower. The downy woodpecker single note call is a little higher pitched, but unless you've listened to a lot of those, it's still pretty difficult to tell apart. And beautiful. Look at this bird. Hairy woodpecker, of course, its bill is about the same length as the width of the head, or actually the length of the head. If you take the bill, move it back toward the head, it's about the same length. Downy woodpecker, on the other hand, the bill is noticeably shorter than the length of the head from the back to the front. So this is hairy woodpecker. There comes the other bird. One came in. They're both feeding young now, so the male and female are alternating, coming to the hole, feeding their offspring. A lot of yellow warblers singing. There's a house wren. Perfect bird for this sort of situation, another cavity nester. So back to this issue of diversity of birds in a bottomland like this. What's the explanation for why there's so many species here? Traditionally, we've always thought that the explanation has to do with the availability of food and the variety of ways that food presents itself. I think particularly insects. Insects are on the ground, under leaves. They're in the air, flying around. They're on trees, under the bark. They're on needles. They're on deciduous tree leaves. They're everywhere. But more recent thought has suggested that maybe it's the diversity of nest sites that provides opportunities for so many species to live in one place like this. Whatever the reason, food, nest sites, we certainly see the end product of this, and that's a large number of bird species. You can hear faintly just up ahead. It's a sapsucker because they have an erratic drumming pattern. The sapsuckers are the only ones who have this random sounding. All the other woodpeckers very uniform. So there's a sapsucker up here, and here the only species possible is Rednaped Sapsucker. Williamson's is a coniferous forest bird for the most part. So it was just up in this area. It's actually there, coming around a tree where there's a row of holes, little holes in the tree, which are sap wells. These are little holes that the bird has drilled in the tree, and sap flows out of these wells, and they actually eat the sap. They have a brushy tongue, if one looked at a tongue under the microscope, and they actually eat the sap and eat insects trapped in the sap. These are cavity nesters. They drill holes in trees and nest inside cavities. Now we know it's a sapsucker not only from the drumming pattern, but notice, if you can, the white mark down the wing, bold white patch right on the wing. Only the sapsuckers have that, so you know it's one of the sapsuckers. The red on the back of the head, hence the name red-naped. Here's the nape of the head, red-naped sapsucker. Say sapsucker 3 times really fast. Let's head another 100 or 200 meters up the road and get to the main Bitterroot River. Here we are, right at the edge of the Bitterroot River, the source of it all for this riparian bottomland. This time of year, late May, early June, the water is as high as it's going to get all year. We have unique bird species to this particular area in the riparian bottomland. Things like common mergansers, spotted sandpipers, and off in the distance on this bridge that Dave McClay built himself some 50 years ago is an osprey nest. Ah, the osprey. What an amazing bird of this riparian bottomland. These are migratory birds. They come back mid to late March. They may use the same nest year after year, add sticks to it. It's amazing when you watch these things build the nest with these sticks there. They won't pick them up off the ground. They'll fly in midair, break these things off, and add to the particular structure that they're built there. They'll use artificial structures like this bridge. Often telephone companies like Montana Power will put platforms to encourage use by these birds. This is certainly one of the most successful conservation stories because of the comeback of this species after the use of DDT.